You are listening to the Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the Overwatch League news and information. The show with Tactical Visor on the statistics and analysis. Here are your hosts, Totally Drunk, Spider, and Slambo.
What is up, guys, and welcome back to Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the latest Overwatch League news, information, and esports analysis. I am your host, Totally Drunk, and tonight, on episode 62, we'll be going around the league discussing the latest Overwatch League news. We'll take a look back at the Contenders Korea playoffs, and the hosts will share their Overwatch League Season 2 rankings for teams number 20 through number 16. But before we can do that and introduce you to my co-host, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who is hanging out with us for our live show tonight on Twitch, and we have to definitely thank all of our repeat listeners out there. So joining me tonight is the man who has been rolling out all week practicing the main tank role, my co-host Spider. And Spider, you know, it's been a while since we've actually sat down and recorded a new show. We obviously had a lot of stuff going on these past few weeks. We had the holidays, you know, both Christmas, New Year's. We got some new suspensions. We had a show match happen. We have some new Overwatch lore, some pretty big news out of that. And, you know, there's been some other stuff happening here and there, but how have these past few weeks been treating you?
I mean, nothing really major happened except for probably the biggest holiday in our family, and then New Year's, and then everybody was sick, and then everybody got better, and then everybody was sick again with a different illness, as tends to happen with kids. And then through the whole time, like you said, there was a lot of Overwatch stuff. I mean, even 2 hours ago, we got a whole bunch new Overwatch stuff to talk about. New PTR patch. Previous to that today, we got a new lore story. So there's it's just coming fast and heavy, and it's awesome. I'm glad to see that they're hitting the new year running, and they're not really kind of waiting around, resting on the laurels. They identify that there is stuff that needs to be taken care of, and I'm glad to see that may be taken care of before Overwatch League, because I think after watching any bit of Contenders, anyone is ready to see something new. I actually feel like the hate for goats at this point may have surpassed the Moth meta. It's almost that ubiquitous that everybody's like, oh god, goats, okay, whatever. So they're like, all right, well, we're just gonna wait until Route 66 so we can see something interesting. And then they're like, oh, Route 66, the match is, at least in the group stage, the match is already over, but let's watch this because this is going to be fun to watch.
Right.
But that there's a whole lot of stuff we can talk about. But what about you? How was your holiday? Like you said, did time off? You kept pretty busy over the break. I mean, you put out our Christmas episode. You still sat down and did a whole bunch of interviews. You didn't really get any time off. So what was the break like for you?
Well, it's actually the only thing I did on break was the holiday special. I didn't do any interviews over that course of time, so
I just slacked off.
Yeah, it was you who fell behind on our YouTube content. But as I mentioned on HND, because I hadn't really been doing all that much, because the holiday special was a lot of fun piecing together, but that didn't really take that much time. So, after so many days, I definitely was going a little stir-crazy, because usually I'm just used to, just grinding out content week after week. So to have, 7 to 10 days where I just have nothing going on was just what am I doing with my free time? There's no Overwatch to watch outside of streams. There's no playoffs going on because Contenders was taking a little bit of a break due to the holidays. So it was kind of a really weird spot that I was in, but luckily, I used some of that time to actually play Overwatch. I've been binge watching It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. So I've been playing a lot of Smash Brothers, obviously, on the Switch. So while I wasn't busy with content creation, I was still doing some other stuff, and, getting to do some other stuff outside of it was a nice change of pace. I did manage to climb out of gold on my Totally Drunk account after going like 10-1 that season, which was pretty good after my decent start in placements. And I picked up a new account during the holiday sale, so as you know, because we've been kind of leveling together on our new accounts.
Yep, main tank life.
Yeah, it's brutal. It definitely can be. And I have to say, like, yes, I know we did get some PTR updates today, which a lot of these changes are directly related to the current meta in the game, that being triple tank, triple support. But, like, I actually don't mind the meta, but I feel like 100% of that is just due to the fact that I've been playing so much Reinhardt. I feel like, as being one of the enablers, I don't have a problem with where we're at, but I know a lot of people are going to disagree. They're going to send their hate mail. They're going to be tweeting at Totally Drunk CTR. What are you talking about? This is the worst meta ever. Yes, guys, I know, but you know, it hasn't been a year and a half of dive meta, which, who knows, that could come back after all the changes that are on the PTR. But what I will say is, like, early impressions on the PTR, while I haven't tested, you know, Blizzard always kind of has this thing where they overtune the heck out of something, and then they nerf it to the ground. There's no in-between. So based off of that logic, I'm assuming that this will, while it might not necessarily mean the death of GOATs overall, it might narrow down the amount of map-specific points that you could actually run it, but it's not going to be the complete death knell like a lot of people are already speculating without actually testing out the changes. But if the pass is any indicator, everything that's on the PTR right now, as of today, is going to get patched straight to live because no tweaks are ever done on the PTR, despite no matter what amount of testing is done. But I definitely encourage people to check out the changes, to do, you know, pugs on the PTR, to, you know, just check everything out. And we'll talk more about the PTR on Wednesday, when we do sit down and record Heroes Never Die again. But for now, we're here to talk about the Overwatch League, and what better way to start the new year than by discussing player discipline in the Overwatch League. So, before our holiday break, you know, we were kind of talking about something that Yiska had tweeted out about some suspensions that were going to be on the horizon, and now we finally know who is in that first wave. So we do know that there are 7 players who have been disciplined for infractions, and these happened on December 21st, and they kind of put it all together on a tracker. So you can just go back to that, and then as they update it, whenever new suspensions happen, it'll all be on the same page. That's all well and good. But who is actually going to be serving some suspensions in Season 2 as we get closer and closer to the new season? First up, we have Apply from Florida Mayhem, who was suspended for 2 games for account boosting. Apply is one of their 2-way players. We have Color Hex from Boston Uprising, who was also suspended 2 games for account boosting. And I have to say, like, out of all of them, this one is probably one of the top 2 that stand out, because for one, you know, Boston Uprising have made a ton of changes during the off-season, and their DPS line without Striker only consists of players who were picked up out of contenders, and they just lost one of their DPS players. So that's definitely
maybe the best one.
Out of the 2, I would definitely agree with that. We have Crystal from the Hanzhou Spark, who was suspended 1 game for account boosting. Now, I don't know, you know, why there's different numbers in regards to the actual infractions for account boosting. It is what it is, but let's continue to go through these. We have Neko from Toronto Defiant, suspended 3 games for selling an account and obstructing league office investigations. We have Ripa from the LA Gladiators, who was suspended 5 games for throwing matches and toxicity. We have Rise from Guangzhou Charge, who was fined $1,000 for account sharing. And then to round out the 7, we have Violet from the San Francisco Shock, who was suspended 2 games for account boosting. Okay, so, you know, we don't have any, like, entire stage suspensions like we did in Season 1. There's no Sato situation where someone was kind of running an account boosting company. But one of the biggest questions that you and I both had was going into this, well, what is this going to mean for certain players like DeFran, like BQB, like Gator, Happy? You know, players that were kind of suspended either by their organization or by Blizzard in the past for a multitude of different things, and they are not on this list. And on this tracker, they said that players who have previously served penalties while playing in contenders are generally not subject to further discipline upon joining the Overwatch League. So that's why Defran isn't on this list, but I'm going to put an asterisk next to that just because, it is Defran. He has been a little toxic on his stream. He has been throwing at times. So there's still a possibility that Defran, your boy, might still come under fire. But looking across, these 7 suspensions, what really stood out to you, whether it was, a player or just the length or the longevity of the suspensions themselves?
I think just the lack of information and the inconsistency to me. Like you pointed out, like you don't really know why some people got 2 games, why some people 1 game. Neko, they didn't really expand on why he obstructed league, which we found out that he was kind of deleting tweets and covering up evidence and all that different stuff. I just wish that they gave you a little more information, or at least a little more standard. Like, if they're just going to throw the generic account boosting at it, then I think everybody should have the same, penalty next to it. So people can say, okay, well, you got caught account boosting, but you were, just a booster part-time. So, that's what they should put. They should put, part-time booster, 2-game suspension. Or, in Sato's case, boosting ringleader, 3-stage suspension. So that's really what stood out to me. I mean, Defran not being on the list did surprise me. I do support Defran, but that one Mercy stream, he was soft throwing. He never explicitly said he was, but he was. He was just damage boosting and stuff like that. Like, anybody who watched it could clearly see it. So I might expect a couple game suspension coming from him.
Right.
But overall, I think the discipline tracker is a good idea. I think it will help the average fan understand what is going on. I think they just need to expand the information a little more. But overall, I do like it, and I do kind of agree with the punishments that were handed out based on the information they did give us. If you're selling accounts and stuff like that, you should get a little bit more suspensions and stuff like that. So overall, I'm sure we'll see this list grow, and there may be some permanent names added to it if we have another XQC situation. But overall, I think this was sorely needed. I just wish there was more consistency to it.
Yeah, that's always been one of the biggest things that the community has been asking for. But you have to think of it this way: when it comes to these infractions, every situation is going to be different. And right. I feel that's probably why they don't go into great detail. But, when you look at Crystal only having to serve 1 game as opposed to 2, which was the baseline for boosting for every other person, well, what made it any less of an infraction than the other 3 players? That we don't
I joked on Heroes Never Die in the chat that maybe he just wasn't any good at it. Maybe he was an account booster, but he got booted off the team because he would only play McCree when the team already had 4 DPS and stuff like that. So who knows? I mean, overall, we're gonna see more account boosting, and we're gonna see more of that. And there's a whole nother discussion about supporting the tier 2 and tier 3 scene that could come into that, and that's why it happens and stuff like that. Because a lot of the times, these people aren't account boosting for nefarious reasons. Some of them are doing it to eat. I mean, we heard the story of who was it, Bishu last season, who came with $3 in his account or something. So I mean, there's the whole living on a dream thing, but then you got to eat, and you can't eat on a dream. So that's a whole nother discussion. Like I said, I think this whole thing is a good idea. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, you also can't eat off of Blizzard bucks.
Yeah, that's
another thing.
But sorry, South America.
Yeah, feels bad, man, or feels SA, man. But for me, the one that kind of threw me off guard was a Rippo one for the 5-game suspension for throwing matches and toxicity, because it made it just kind of seem okay, so if you're throwing games, that is 2.5 times as worse as boosting someone's account. And I just
Again, do you remember what I said? I said it's because at least the boosters are trying to play the game.
Mhm.
Throwers aren't even attempting it. So they're like, well, it's ruining comp because people are going to eventually play at a rank they don't belong. But at least they're trying.
Mhm.
Who knows?
Yeah, so
And this is going to come back around in a later discussion.
yeah. Okay, so just based off of the suspensions, which one do you feel like is going to be the biggest blow at the start of the season for these teams?
Color Hex, by far. If we are not in a GOATS meta, I think any DPS is going to hurt a team that are high profile, like Color Hex, Crystal, Nico. I think could hurt, but due to Boston Uprising's lack of depth, I think Color Hex might be the most impactful.
Yeah, Color Hex for me is definitely the biggest one. I would say Nico is probably the second one to that, but just based off of, how the outlook might be changing due to, stuff on the PTR. Color Hex, only having one DPS, not that great for Boston Uprising. So that's definitely going to be something to keep an eye on that first couple of weeks in Stage 1 for Boston. But moving on, we do currently have all of this stuff happening in Contenders, which does include some drama, which we'll dive more into on Wednesday. But they've actually been testing out a way to battle toxicity outside of the game by implementing a moderation system in Twitch chat. And this is going on right now in the Overwatch Contenders Twitch channel. Which, for one, like, if you're going to test something, that's probably not the best avenue to go about it, just because, you're maybe only getting anywhere from, 2,000 viewers to maybe, 5,400 on a good day. So,
I mean, it's a small-scale test.
It
I
is.
mean, maybe testing the systems more than the actual implementation.
This is true. So basically, right now, you have to link your Twitch and Blizzard Battle.net account together in order to, be talking in Twitch chat. And, the way that they spun this was hey, we're looking for ways to improve the viewing experience of esports. And to me, I just don't get the point of it because I never pay attention to the chat anyway. Regardless of if it's behind the paywall for, the All Access Pass or things like that, I just never have the Twitch chat open when I'm watching esports. That's not my focus. So, to me, this is a big shrug moment. I'm like, well, I don't get it. I just hope it's not a case where they're gonna look at this and be like, you know what, guys? This is going to bring in more infractions for in-game bans. I don't want to see the correlation between Twitch chat and being banned in-game happen. Because either way, it's so easy to just sign up on a new account. And, if someone's just gonna be an asshat, they would just sign up for a new account anyway and link that one to their new account. I don't see the point of this moderation tool.
I don't think it's that easy to change Battle.net accounts once you've linked it. I think you have to get a moderator to change it because I think that's what Ed had to go through. So I feel like there's a few extra steps there. Now it is easy to just sign up for a new Battle.net account and a new Twitch account. Right. You could just get a whole new of both and then link it and do it. But I mean, really, there's three major schools in this. There's your school, which really doesn't care, because you don't read Twitch chat anyway, which I'm mostly in that school. But I feel like the bulk of the discussion is the other two, which is people who think it's a good idea that this is going to happen and toxic trolls who are afraid of possible consequences. Because if you look at the responses of those two parties, boy, that will show you what is really happening. I personally think this is a good idea to try, just because I have always been a big proponent of there needs to be a little more consequences for things you say in chat. In Twitch chat, is no exception. This was kind of what I was alluding to earlier. It kind of comes down to how Blizzard does it. So if Blizzard is super heavy-handed, they're handing out Overwatch bans for tryhard sevens and stuff like that. The Pepes and stuff like that. That's not the right way to do about it. If you're dropping F bombs and N bombs and the N word and all that stuff, maybe then you should get a ban in the game. Like if you're throwing out a whole bunch of hate speech and doing stuff like that, that's one story. If you're memeing and being stupid, as long as it's a general meme like Pepe and stuff like that, I think that's a whole different story. So I think it's really going to come down to how heavy-handed Blizzard is, and I think if they toe the line, well, I think this could work. Like I think this could be a good incentive for people to actually engage in Twitch chat, and maybe people like you will actually get something out of Twitch chat other than the dumb memes. Maybe there will be actual discussion and stuff. Like if you ever follow like Jane's stream or somebody who or Karku's stream is actually a little better because Jane's is kind of big now, so it can go pretty fast when he's not in subscriber mode. But like Karku's stream, there's a lot of good discussion that happens in chat, and that can actually happen in an Overwatch League match if people aren't tryhard sevening and throwing out racist banter and stuff like that. So I feel like this is good to try, but it's going to come 100% down to how heavy-handed Blizzard is. And if Blizzard falls down that slippery slope, I won't be afraid to be like, no, this didn't work. You got to scale it back. You're penalizing people for stuff that it's stupid and doesn't matter. But I am willing to give this the benefit of the doubt. Like I feel like this is something that is good to try just for esports as a whole, just because if it does work and they do toe that line, it is going to be easier to bring in investors because they're going to say, look, here's our Twitch chat. Here's our, engagement level. People are actually talking about the matches while they're happening. So, people are paying attention. So, they're going to watch those ads. They're going to see, Toyota up there. They're going to see stuff like that. So that's a real easy metric to follow in marketing. Like, Here is our engagement. Twitch said we had 200,000 viewers, but we had, 130,000 active in chat. That's amazing because you don't get that level of engagement anywhere. You don't get it in TV, you don't get it in radio. So I think this could be a boon to the league if they do it right. But I am definitely on the iffy side because especially as of late with Blizzard, the way they've been handling things, it can go south real fast and it can get real bad real fast. And I hope they don't do it, but it's possible. Like this could work.
Yeah, for me too, it's just when you kind of look at the test and then you kind of compare it to, well, how many people are actually going to be chatting. When you just talk about the viewer base alone, you're on opposite ends of the spectrum. You're looking at 5,000 for contenders on a high end to, we'll say baseline minimum 100,000 viewers for the Overwatch League. Upwards of, whatever number you want to throw out. We saw matches that were a lot of times doing over 250,000. So it's so far to the other extreme. I don't know if Contenders is the best thing to have a baseline of, but we'll have to wait and see what exactly is going to come out of it. So something to keep an eye on. Because even with the All Access Pass channel, for the chat, there were still at times where even that one even gated behind a paywall. Now, granted, it wasn't a huge paywall to begin with, just due to the price of the All Access Pass. Even that one was getting out of hand. So it's really kind of hard to see the middle ground in this entire situation. But I'll keep an open mind about it and see where it expands from this point. But moving on, we do have some news about Effect. And he recently came out as bisexual. So we do know, last season we talked a lot about the Dallas Fuel, about a lot of the issues the team was dealing with. You got a lot of grief for it as a Dallas Fuel fan. And South Korea is known for its opposition of gay rights, and Effect had mentioned on his Twitter that this is something that he's been hiding since his childhood. This is something that he never hinted at outside of his family, and like most people, when he did come out, he faced a lot of criticism. And when you kind of look back at things, Effect was always someone that wore his emotions on his sleeves, and you could just see the amount of pressure that he was under in the inaugural season. And this is definitely something that was additive to everything that was going on in Season 1 for him as a player. So for me right now, it's just I'm glad that Effect can move forward. He can just stop trying to pretend to be someone that he's not. And I feel like this is only going to further just not only how people see him, but it's just going to improve his play because he's not going to have like such a huge burden on his shoulders, kind of like weighing him down. So I'm really anxious to see how Effect is going to do in the new season. And, we talk about the Dallas Fuel team, especially their coaching staff. We're both very high on both Arrow and Jane, and we saw the quick turnaround that Dallas Fuel had in Stage 4. So I can only imagine how this team is going to fare once they have more time together as a team. Because if their coaching staff is any indicator of how far this team can go, Dallas Fuel can have one of the biggest turnarounds in Season 2.
By far. Like, I think, this was always in the back of his mind. It definitely played a role in some of his frustrations in the first season. So him coming out, him getting this off his chest, I think was the right thing to do. Not just in the Overwatch League, but in life. I think it's always better to be true to yourself. And I hope this lets us see the return of old Effect. Like, when he was, in what you would say peak form, when he wasn't having the frustrations and stuff like that, he was a force to be reckoned with, and I think Dallas is going to need that moving forward. So I am looking forward to that. But overall, I'm just happy for him. Like, I think going forward, he will be much happier. He'll be much better off. So just go out, show your support for the guy. Be like, yeah, good job. Whatever you want to say. Like, I liked his tweet, and I said, I'm happy for you. And if you follow me on Twitter, I'm sorry. Like, I almost never talk on Twitter, but I will retweet. So that was one of the few instances where I actually sent out a tweet to him. I'm like, I'm glad. I hope, this helps you out and stuff like that. So overall, nothing but good things will come from this in the long run. Sure, there might be some adversity at first, but it'll help him out in the long run.
If this brings back the effect that we saw when the analysts picked Shanghai Dragons to beat the Dallas Fuel,
I remember that Eichenwald map where he just solo carried. Like, he 1v6'd as McCree like 3 times on Eichenwald. Like, he was just dancing around that castle like the cowboy that he was.
I have never seen so much murderous intent, at least in game before. So, I hope we get that effect back for Season 2, because there's really no telling what amount of damage he will cause to these other teams. But moving on, we also had a show match that took place where we saw the Guangzhou Charge go up against the Seoul Dynasty. So this was the first time we got a look at one of the expansion teams, one of the new 8 teams to join the Overwatch League for Season 2. And this series ended in a draw after the team split the series at 2 games apiece. Now, it is worth noting this is a show match. I don't want to base any of our rankings off of what happened in this match or the California Cup or things like that. And, show matches and scrimmages, aren't the best way to kind of know where a team is at. Because if you win in scrims, that doesn't necessarily correlate to getting wins on stage. But that being said, we saw a lot of Mirror Goats compositions in the Pacific Challenge. Who stood out to you in this show match for these teams? Because I know for me, I was really surprised by the Charge's potential overall. We saw a couple of different looks. I felt like their team synergy, while it wasn't fully there, they were a lot further progressed than I was expected them to be already at this point. And if I'm talking about an individual player, I felt like Munchkin, out of both of the teams, was the standout player. His Zarya play especially was having constant high energy. The follow-through with his beam damage was just on another level. And there were multiple times in that show match where the Dynasty were losing the fight, and Munchkin was the guy to clutch out and turn the way that the fight was going for the Seoul Dynasty.
Well, since you stole mine, I guess I'll go with Fletus Brigida, because he held WM1 like a champ. He did have some constant stuns. But yeah, I think Munchkin's Zarya in the match we're going to talk about later. Well, one of the matches we're going to talk about later in Contenders, you really see how important Zarya can be when she gets that high energy, because a lot of people make jokes like, And they actually pointed this out in contenders, like there's no DPS currently be played, but Zarya effectively is your DPS. Like you get her to high energy, and she's the one melting the enemy team. And Munchkin always had high energy, and anytime he would get above like 70 energy, you would just watch the charge just disappear. So it was really fun to watch. I think Fisher, Fisher played really well. I wasn't that impressed with Marvel. I think that's how you say his name.
Yes.
He was the main tank that they had in before Fisher. I feel like they put him in just to trial him, but I don't see him moving forward unless there's something wrong with Fisher. Like maybe he's sick or something. Just because on every level, Fisher outclassed him. Like Marvel's shatters were bad. His whole Reinhardt play was just seemed off. Like it didn't seem like it was with the team. And I like you said, I don't want to base too many assumptions on this, but if the rumors are true that Fisher hasn't been scrimming that much with the team yet, like he just started scrimming with the team, Seoul could get very scary very quickly. Like their synergy was already ridiculous. I mean, Ryu Jae-hong looked back to his old self. Like when he was on Zenyatta, I felt like he was playing Ana, just the way he was killing people, the way he was keeping his teammates alive, like his timings, like everything was perfect. But if I had to pick like a standout moment, Hotba's Tracer. I mean, come on. Every time Hotba gets on Tracer, it doesn't disappoint. You're like, why is this guy not playing DPS? Like, what is he doing? Like he could be like top 3 Tracer in the league. So, I hope we get to see him more on Tracer, but that was the standout moment for me.
Yeah, and hopefully that happens outside of the playoffs, because that was the only time we really got to see it when he was on the Philadelphia Fusion. But that being said, what I will say is I enjoyed the fact that they had the Contenders Korea, casters doing this one. It felt more at home, and it definitely is going to help out with pronunciation, so people won't just call Jexay Jesse, hopefully. I hope that's the case. Thanks so much for our recap for the host as they finish up their new episode. But definitely check it out. I do know they have the English VODs available on the Guangzhou Charges YouTube channel. They did not have the broadcast archives, checked. So it took, a couple of days for them to get that up, similar to what happened with the California Cup. But definitely go check that out if you haven't. But again, just don't base off of everything off of a show match, just because, there's definitely going to be times where they're going to be hiding their cards because, it is essentially, just a practice match in itself. As Mel gets timed out for, spamming too many things. Mel, what are you doing? Oh, she's spamming caps. That's what it is. Yeah, our bot doesn't like you, apparently. But
wow, you said that thing super sensitive.
Rude. Yeah, I know. But moving on, we do have some Twitch stats for the Overwatch League, and this was released by the Esports Observer, who listed the top Twitch channels of 2018, and these results were based on hours watched. So we had Overwatch League having a very first, a good showing. Overall, strong performance, ended in 4th place overall. We had Overwatch in 4th with 74.6 million. Shroud was in 3rd with 97.39 million. Riot Games was 2nd with 99.31 million. And Ninja topped it off at 226.43 million. Now, biggest takeaway from this is that out of these, the Overwatch League had the highest hours watched per hour streamed with 108,588 viewers per hour. That was over the course of 687 hours. But, this doesn't include YouTube or, outside sources. This doesn't really include the Asian viewer base. But what were your thoughts on Overwatch League actually breaking in the top 10, let alone, being ranked 4th overall?
It's awesome. I mean, thinking about it, I expected Overwatch League to be up there. And 4th actually really surprised me due to the amount of streams that people do all day. Like there are many other streamers that have big audiences, like Co Carnage and stuff that I was surprised wasn't on this list. But the big one that stood out to me is, when you consider the hours watched, Overwatch League was the top with the basically the stat when considering the hours watched per hour streamed, Overwatch League was the top, which was awesome. Uh so overall, like this is a big win, and we always went back to, people were like, did Overwatch League succeed in season one? Did they do this? Did they do that? There was that whole discussion at the end of the season one, and we were all like, yeah, absolutely, it succeeded. So uh now we have like actual proof from Twitch that Overwatch League by any metric succeeded. So I think this shows that there is a big market for Overwatch League. I think moving into season two, if they play their cards right, we'll see more growth, much like League of Legends saw when LCS went into its seasonal iterations and stuff like that. So overall, like this is great news. Like anybody that's a fan of Overwatch League should be happy to hear this news.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what the command was to remove the timeout. I'll figure that out later. But anyways,
Oh, she should be good.
okay.
I think I untimed her.
Okay, you got it already. That is good. So we had a little bit of drama, and I want to talk about the one that's Overwatch League specific. So basically, lo and behold, Michael is in hot water yet again, and there was like a series of events that happened. So Gator, who was on the Atlanta Reign, accidentally uploaded a scrim VOD between the Atlanta Reign and the New York Excelsior. He posted this as public when he shouldn't have, and then a lot of people went out, they downloaded the VOD, and then you had Michael, who looked to use this VOD and monetize it on his YouTube channel. So, a lot of this does fall on Gator, but, Michael's already been in hot water with a lot of community, and he drew a lot of backlash from this move, just due to the fact that he was trying to profit off of it. And, because of all this backlash, there was a series of events where, he did remove the VOD, but he got removed from ESTNN, which is an esports website which he's been writing for. And, Phase 2 parted ways with Kangarna, who Michael had coached to a winless group stage in Contenders North America. Then Phase 2 just got rid of Michael altogether as their head coach. And then, fast forward to today, this morning, where Michael announced that he's just done leaking, and I'm sure that was monetized too. I didn't actually watch the video, but, it's Michael, so probably a 10 ads anyway. So I don't know what this is going to mean for his Overwatch League talk show that he's been doing with Be Live, but at the end of the day, is anyone really surprised that Michael did this? No.
No.
It just comes to show that no matter how many times he says, like, oh yeah, I'm learning, it's not actually the case, and we could just move on. But I was just happy to see Phase 2 making that separation, going back to that MS Paint logo, which is really what they were known for, so I'm happy to see that.
No, I'm 100% in agreement with the way Yiska and Jane felt about this. I mean, there are a lot of opportunities for a lot of content creators to leak and distribute things from behind the scenes, and it's not their place to do that. Like it's cool if you want to talk about some stuff here and there, based on what the subject matter is, but that's not what you're there for as a journalist. You're there for actually reporting on the things that they want you to report on. You're there to kind of put your own spin on it and stuff like that. You're not there to leak scrim VODs of a team that isn't even in the Overwatch League yet. They haven't even played a game yet. And that's what really, and Jane and Yiska both kind of touched on this point, but this really hurts the Reign because teams will be less likely to scrim them. And, we've heard in the past that teams are very selective of who they will scrim with. Like Dallas was straight up like after stage 2, the only team that would scrim against us is Shanghai. So how much, how much practice do you think we were really getting? Stuff like that. So they didn't use those words, but I will use those words for them because Taimo was not very happy when he was talking about it. But it's gonna hurt the Reign, and I hope teams don't let this hurt the Reign because it looks like it was a mistake by one of the Reign's players, and then Michael tried to profit off of it, and that's that's not what you're supposed to do. And I watched the VOD. The VOD was crap. Like, you couldn't really see anything.
Yeah, that's because it was 360p. Gator, what the heck? Why would you stream it? That is what I want to know.
Right. It was goats. So that's all you needed to know. And I'm glad to see that people are actually like holding him very accountable for this. And the fact that he got dropped by the ESTNN and stuff like that is perfect. Like, this is the accountability that I was looking for when he did all the other shady stuff. And then to lose phase 2 and Kangarna and all that is just like the cherry on top. So I've never been a big fan of him or his methods. Like, I took a lot of journalism in school and stuff like that up until college, when I actually had to concentrate on something. And they always hammered home like journalistic integrity, like due process. If they skip due process, then it's open game. But until they do that, it's it's up to you to do the right thing. And if you do the right thing, good things will happen to you. And you can see like actual esports writers and stuff like that, like Jacob Wolf and stuff, have made a whole career out of doing the right thing, regardless of how you actually feel about them. So I am glad to see that he is getting his comeuppance.
Couldn't happen to a better person. Moving on, as I mentioned earlier, we are in the middle of Contenders playoffs, and it includes a region that we cover, that being Korea, because, where's all the talent coming from? Straight out of Contenders, Korea. So we do have the first round results. Of course, this is the round of 8, the quarterfinals. And Spider, we had 4 matches over, this past weekend. So what went down in our top 8 teams?
Sure. So first up, we have Stormquake defeated MVP Space 3-1. Runaway defeated Kongtu Pantera 3-0. WGS Armament pulled off the huge upset and defeated GC Busan Wave. And then Element Mystic defeated Geekstar 3-0. So it wasn't to be the 2 upsets in a row. But overall, like they were all interesting games to watch. But my 2 standouts will probably be the 2 that we talk about, which was Stormquake versus MVP Space and WGS Armament versus GC Busan Throw Wave.
Absolutely. So let's talk about that Stormquake versus MVP Space match. So we opened up on Nepal, and I really liked the look that we got out of Stormquake. We saw them run Orisa with McCree. We kind of had like the protect the cowboy type composition, which definitely threw them for a loop. So MVP Space, really the biggest story out of this is a team that has not adapted outside of the current meta. They just don't have the depth that these other teams have, and Stormquake definitely exposed that. Stormquake did in fact give out the first cap on Nepal, and MVP Space basically looked to chase, which ends up backfiring on them, which ends up leading to a quick flip. But what I loved about that map in particular was Amy was constantly trying to pressure MVP Space, Amy being their Lucio player. I was just constantly like behind MVP, looking to get a boop or just trying to get someone out of position. And that led to a lot of secured kills for Proper, who was on McCree. So all in all, like, there was a lot of good chain support ultimates out of Stormquake, a lot of sustain there just due to that. And Kaiser, through and through, came out on top for the Reinhardt battle in this series in particular. And, Oberon, kind of across the series, got isolated a lot. So just not having your Reinhardt a lot of the times just makes you so susceptible. And, we've seen so many looks from Stormquake. They were really the team that kind of brought that quad DPS Route 66 composition into the forefront, which we're seeing across the region now. And if you're able to kind of just not only win the GOATS battle, but also play off meta, chances are, you're going to be coming out ahead one way or another. And this loss basically made MVP Space drop a lot of their roster. They've already retooled ahead of this upcoming season. But, I love seeing Kaiser back in form, which is great to see. And, we got to see some pretty easy wins out of Stormquake, especially on Blizzard World. But looking kind of across the board here, what were some of the standout moments for you?
Just the first map, or in the match
Just
as a whole?
whichever, in general.
Um, I mean, in general, I have to talk about Kaiser's Orisa on the first map. His Orisa was actually really, really good, so I hope we get to see more of it. Like, his halts were on point. He was like fragging out on Orisa whenever they'd give him a chance. And the funny part was, like, they started with the hardcore, like, protect the McCree comp, but once they took the point, like, Orisa was kind of on the point, and McCree was like doing his own thing. So like they never actually collapsed on the McCree. So at that point, it became less of protect the McCree comp and just keep them busy while the McCree kills them all. Bianca was a big standout to me. Like I haven't paid too much attention to them on Diva, but it seemed like every time they get a Diva bomb, Bianca would pick up like 2 or 3. So it goes to show that Diva can make a huge impact. Overall, like there wasn't a whole. It was like standard goats for most of it. Like other than the first point in Nepal, the second point in Nepal was goats feed goats, and Stormquake actually lost the second point pretty handily. Like they got outmaneuvered there, but then the third point they brought it back pretty easily, and then beyond that, like. I don't know, like Kaiser. I'm trying to think. Who is it? Who was the? Was it Lastro that kept coming up on the kill feed? It seemed like Lastro would show up. Yeah, it seemed like Lastro every time there was any amount of CC on the field, Lastro would dominate the kill feed. Yaki was really good at, not, I guess, showing his grabs. That stood out to me because it seems like the more the goats meta evolves, the more important it is for the Zarya player to be sneaky, and Yaki was definitely one of them. And the match we're going to talk about next was actually more so dominated by the Zarya. But overall, like this, even though it was 3-1, this was mostly Stormquake's game. Like it comes down to like what you said. Kaiser was just out maneuvering Oberon or however you want to say it, in every instance. Like he would push him in specific directions, and if you go back and watch it, you'll see it. Like he angles his shield in certain directions that he pushes him in certain ways that makes him get out of position, and then Kaiser can go for the fabled like Kaiser charge and just charge in there, or earth shatter half the team and stuff like that. So it goes to show like how important main tanks can be, and if your main tank is getting mind gamed, you're gonna lose it regardless of how good some of the other players are performing. Unless you got who is it, Carrion? Carrion can almost carry.
Yeah, he was definitely clutching out in some of the other series. For me, like it wasn't all bad for MVP space when it was Goats v Goats, but I will say, their play on Assault throughout this season has been really good. They went undefeated on Assault maps, and you can definitely tell based off of I would say like Yaki basically just across the board on his Zarya play was the stand-up because he was constantly at high energy. There were times where he would use the Graviton Surge to, prevent the snowball. Because I know when Stormquake was attacking, they had like over 6 minutes left to capture B, but, Yaki was there to kind of put a halt to that. But something that I did notice was a lot of the times when it came to the Zenyatta differences between the teams was Undyne constantly was coming in late with his Transcendence, too late to the point where the fight was already lost, or he was just behind in the overall ult economy battle against Lastro. So that was definitely something that stood out, because Lastro, with his play, he is more of a fragger just outright, but he was definitely adding a lot more pressure in regards to the shield battle, so he was dishing out more damage and thus earning more Transcendences just across the board. But really, nothing too far out of the ordinary. We did get to see a little bit of Ashe on Route 66 when Stormquake brought out the quad DPS. So this, I was so happy to see this. So for quad DPS, we saw Tracer, Pharah, Ashe, and Hanzo. So, we haven't gotten to see a ton of Ashe, but what were your first thoughts on Ashe in Contenders?
she did really good, and I think with the PTR changes, she's going to be even better because armor's going to affect that TNT even less. And unfortunately, I think the quad DPS is so specific to Route 66. It's hard to say how much of a success was due to Ashe, but most of it I would probably attribute to the Pharah. I mean, sure, the Ashe put in a lot of pressure, and Bob actually did some work the second time he was sent out. The first time he was sent out, he did not do something. The second time he did something. So I did think that was pretty cool. There was actually one moment on Blizzard World that I want to talk about. The first 2 minutes of the attack, MVP Space's attack, the very first attack, there were no eliminations for the first 2 minutes of the attack. So if people want to like make an argument about how boring Goats is to watch, clip that and use that, because it is literally like, okay, they're coming. Let me swing my hammer. Okay, they backed off. Let me wait a little bit. Okay, all right, they're coming again, and stuff like that. So that was pretty funny. And Temple of Anubis, the like 45-second Bianca stagger, where they just like they abused that diva. Like I felt bad. Like I felt like somebody had to like blur the screen out because it was getting so bad. And like what capped it off for me was when Kaiser just charges them like straight back again, all the way back. So I felt bad for that. But yeah, the quad DPS is always fun. They stuck on it a lot longer than we expected. Like at one point they capped the first point and they went to switch, and they switched, and then they said, you know what, it worked. And then they switched back, which you never see in pro Overwatch, because they just reset their ults, and then they just continued on until the third point, which regardless of what meta has been in, has always been like a ground pound tank meta for Route 66. Like even when we were in dive meta, you saw people switch into like Roadhog, Reinhardt, stuff like that, just because you need that presence, because it's almost like a 2 CP map at that point, and there isn't a whole lot of verticality to it. So overall, it was cool. Like I was happy to see Bob, and I was happy that he did eventually do something. And I'm sure we'll see more Ashe going forward once hopefully these changes go through.
Yeah, it is worth noting on Route 66, after they did get that first point, there was like 30 seconds where Stormquake was debated on what they wanted to do, because they didn't make some swaps, and then they ended up moving Lastro back to Zenyatta. So at that point, they were still running DPS heavy, but it was only 3 DPS at that point. So they didn't quite stick to the quad 4. But, they just had so much pressure on MVP space where they felt like, they were still going to be in an optimal situation. And then, just with the way that Lastro was playing on Zenyatta, just fragging out time and time again during any sort of CC moment, that's a DPS player in itself, so they don't quite need the 4 DPS overall. But moving on, we got to talk about the GC Busan waivers, this WGS Armament series, because this was a huge upset. This one went all 5 maps, and going into this season of Contenders Korea, GC Busan Wave were one of the few teams that really didn't get poached at all. They kept their entire roster from Season 2, so they already had so much built-in synergy, and they were pretty much ahead of the curve compared to the other teams just due to that. Whereas you had teams like Runaway, teams like Kondu Panthera, who had to completely restructure their rosters, and both made it to the playoffs, and then one dominated the other team. So you could just see how drastic, some of these retooled teams were, because you had Runaway just absolutely dismantle KDP. And a lot of that, yes, is just due to the fact that Runaway were the returning champions, but they were the team that a lot of players were looking to sign to first. So they basically had first pickings out of the lot when it came to the free agency period in between these seasons. But the story of WGS Armament pulling off the upset, without question, to me, comes down to Karayan.
There you go.
It is absolutely ridiculous what Karayan was able to do in the clutch for WGS Armament, because there were times where they were in a losing situation. The Shatter would come out, sometimes from behind, and then Karayan would just clean up
Mm-hmm.
to the point where you could never truly count WGS Armament out of a fight. And there's just been so few times in the past where we've seen a player, whether it's a main tank player or otherwise, just kind of single-handedly take control of a series. So I have to say, like, we really didn't expect that much out of a team like WGS Armament at the start of the season. But for them to brawl it out and pull off the upset is absolutely massive. The downside out of this is, if you kind of look at the landscape now that we are getting into the semifinals, they have a date with Runaway,
Mm-hmm.
and that's rough. Runaway had the biggest map differential out of the quarterfinal matches, and WGS having to face Runaway now, it's gonna be pretty rough overall. But a lot of that series will come down to that main tank battle, and we'll see whether or not Karayan can extend that momentum that they had. But when we talk about Contenders Korea, this is the type of match that we're wanting to see. Going into the season, a lot of people were just kind of up in arms, like, well, all the talent is gone out of Contenders Korea. So many people got poached. And then you see a team like WGS Armament come in, and while they didn't have the biggest performance in the group stage, they came to play in the quarterfinals. They pulled off the upset, and it just comes to show, despite what your track record is in the past, despite the player movement, there are still Cinderella teams in Contenders Korea. We saw it in the past with O2 Orient when they defeated Element Mystic, and now we saw it with WGS Armament as they defeat GC Busan Wave. And the icing on the cake to me was the fact that the tiebreaker was played on Busan, and WGS took it 2-0.
Yeah. No, this whole match, like you said, came down to Karayan, just basically outmaneuvering them in every turn. But I do want to point out that the one player that kind of had a few up moments, but I would expect more out of, was Edison. Like, Edison was mostly quiet most of the night, and he was, one of the kind of the premier players. Like, he kind of made his name over the group stage and stuff like that, as being, this almost Zarya god. And like he hit a couple of good grabs. Like, I don't want to discount him. Like, he had a few good moments, but overall, like, compared to what is it, Gargoyle that was on WGS, like, Gargoyle was hitting the grabs more often. He was at higher energy most of the time. He was following up with the bubbles on Karayan when Karayan needed it. Like, overall, like, it was just the synergy was better for WGS Armament. And when we were streaming on Friday, you were like, this game's gonna be such a total wash. And then when it happened, we were both kind of like, oh, where has this team been all season? So I was happy to see that this went all 5 games, and I do think it's funny that GC Busan did lose on Busan at the end. Like, that is, that's a certain level of coincidence that you just don't expect to happen. But I am curious to see if Karayan can stand up to some of the more aggressive tanks down the line, because he was given a lot of room to work with. When they were down, they kind of gave him his space. So I'm curious to see what will happen if he ends up against like Kaiser or something like that down the line, where they're constantly in your face and stuff like that. And teams, like I said, it kind of came down to Edison. Edison missed a couple of key bubbles that could have stopped shatters. There's a lot of like minute plays that go into goats that Edison was normally really good at. And that's kind of how he made his name, but he just, I don't know if he had an off night or what, or if he just got tilted, who knows. Overall, though, this is, like you said, this is the type of match that we want to see. Like, the 3-0s are fun to watch, but they're not really what we're looking for. Like, we want to see like these close matches, and where teams kind of have to iterate a little bit and go off of that. So overall, like, I hope moving forward that WGS continues the upsets, because that would be a heck of a story to just, this is the team we initially wrote off as being like 3-0'd in the first round, and now they're in the finals, stuff like that. So it just goes to show that there is a lot of potential out there. You just gotta have a good night.
Yeah, what I will say about Edison is you kind of have to look at the other side of the field and look at DPI.
Mm-hmm.
Cause yeah, you bring up the Gravitons. A lot of them kind of joined Slambo in the Abyss because they got eaten up.
This goes back to being sneaky. You have to be sneaky when you're Zarya now. You have to play her almost like Sombra, like out of nowhere, that kind of thing. Like been here all along.
I didn't track the amount of Gravitons that were eaten, but it felt like the ratio was pretty 50-50 between what was landed and what was sucked up by the defense matrix. So DPI across the board had a very strong series, and I want to talk about Temple of Anubis really quick, especially on the defense for WGS Armament, because basically what was happening is you had DPI kind of like playing on the high ground, kind of like on the left-hand side, so he was like on one of the banners, and then he'd like swoop in and not only separate people, but he would get the booster damage. He would land rockets. He'd get a lot of early charge, and that opened up a lot of opportunities for WGS to handily take that fight. And that's not really something we see all that much. And you could tell, like, for GC Busan Wave, they didn't really know how to approach point A on Anubis because they didn't know where DPI was half of the time. And then every time he'd swoop in, they'd secure an early pick. To the point where it basically forced JC Busan Wave to try to take that high ground approach, which, doesn't necessarily always work on that map. But across the board, DPI looked absolutely amazing. So yes, Karayan had an absolute monster performance in the clutch, but a lot of it also boils down to the fact that Edison was not able to have what we would expect to see from him performance-wise on Zarya, because he's not getting the full utility out of the Graviton Surges due to DPI's defense matrix. But if you haven't caught this match in particular, I highly recommend going back and watching it. Of course, you can find all of it on the Overwatch Contenders YouTube channel, or, just on the Twitch VODs in themselves, but probably easier to find them on YouTube, so be sure to check that one out. So with that being said, this will lead into our main discussion, and this is where we are going to start to rank our Season 2 Overwatch League rankings. So for now, we're going to do this a little bit differently. We're going to do these 5 teams at a time. We're going to start from the bottom, so we'll start at teams number 20 and go through the number 16 teams, and once we get to the end of it, that is when we will average out all of the network host rankings. So, you'll have Edinar's averages in there. You'll have Ren. You might even have Blazing Bob's in there, depending on if he submits his rankings at some point. I'll have more on that later. But we're going to start from the bottom. And I know, my soulmate is not here. But across the board, we were pretty close between the 3 of us.
Yeah.
So I'll start with Slambo's rankings, and you and I can kind of go from there, because you and I actually have the exact same thing. And there's only one difference between Slambo and our rankings, and it comes from the teams that we have number 20 and number 19. So at number 20, Slambo has the Washington Justice. At 19, he put Florida Mayhem. 18th, we have Chengdu Hunters. 17, we have Boston Uprising, and then at 16, he had Toronto Defiant. So, we'll kind of take this one at a time, since, both of us have it the same way. So, since we are in agreement, at number 20, we have Florida Mayhem. So when we look at this roster, who did they keep? We have Awesome Guy, who has a new screen name for Season 2. I don't know why he changed it. Maybe it was because of a subpar performance in Season 1, that he felt like he didn't deserve Awesome in his name.
Less than Awesome Guy?
I don't know. I don't know. They kept Saya Player, which honestly should be no surprise to anyone, because Saya Player was 100% the standout player on that team, bar none. And he had very good stats on the Widowmaker, despite not necessarily having the support around him. And then he also kept Tavik to drive the bus.
And cook the kebabs.
And to cook the kebabs, because they need someone to do that. I don't know why else you would keep Tavik outside of the potential for coach crossover.
Trade bait, maybe. I don't know. Like, who knows?
Is he really trade bait, though, when you consider that, yes, he is one of the OGs, but a lot of the OGs have kind of fallen in regards to overall performance? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know why, especially when you look at the rest of the team.
Mhm.
But they must see something outside of what we know. I mean, he was a very versatile player at one point, and he was a very good versatile player at one point. So if you take last season's Overwatch League out of your mind, he could have value if he can get back to that point. The point that is he has to get back to that point, and if he doesn't, like, this is his pretty much last shot. And looking at the rest of the team, he may not get another shot.
Yeah, so when we look at the roster changes that Florida Mayhem made, they dropped Logix, they dropped Manitin, Kwoosh, Zebosai, Zupe, and Zapis. And when we look at the players that they added, we have Zephyr, Hogapune, Apply, who, we mentioned earlier is on a 2-way contract with Mayhem Academy. He is also going to be serving a suspension. We have Chris, BQB, and Swan. So, why did I rank Florida Mayhem number 20? For one, I feel like, and this is not just Mayhem specific, but when I look at this organization from the bottom to the top, both at the Contenders level and at Overwatch League level, there are some fundamental issues with their in-house staff. I don't know why they kept Mineral as their coach. This was a team that in Season 1 were short-staffed, both, with their coaching staff, with their roster, across the board. They did not have a lot of pieces to work with, and that hurt them more times than not. I don't know if there was enough solid play in Season 1 to warrant them bringing Mineral back. And, while they added some more pieces, I wouldn't say a lot of the pieces are really standout players. Like, Zephyr, he had an okay season for the Dynasty. He wasn't, like, a standout player. Hogapune,
Passable.
he was passable. Hogapune did more in Contenders than he did in Overwatch League, but, he does bring some experience to it. So I'm not terrible with that one. I feel like Apply is really going to be one of the bigger names that could turn the tides for them, or BQB would be the other player. But across the board, when I see what happened with Mayhem Academy, despite, what I felt like was a strengthened team compared to their prior season, they completely shit the bed. They had a very bad performance. Their only win came against Kungarna,
Yep.
who didn't win a single match. I do not have faith in this organization to be able to turn it around. I don't know. What are you feeling with Florida?
I kind of felt the same way. And I struggled with this later in the rankings when we had to rank Shanghai. And a lot of people are probably wondering, like, well, why isn't Shanghai last? They haven't won a game. Well, we'll get to that. It's the same thing. It's like the organization. I don't know how much faith I can put in them. Maybe Mineral will feel better with a Korean team than he did with an EU team. Like, who knows? What discussions were had behind the scenes. Because when you look at it, that's what they went to. They dumpstered an EU team and brought in mostly a Korean team. They do have some non-Koreans on their team, but it is mostly a Korean team. It will be a Korean core team moving forward. And that's a big transition. And this is kind of one of the teams that, as we talk later, this is going to be one of the teams that, like, they aren't good until I see them actually play.
Right.
So last season, I rated Shanghai the lowest out of any of us. Like, I rated them 11 because I just didn't have enough information on them. And I kind of felt that way with Florida. I don't trust the organization. I don't have enough enough information about how these players are playing together because there have been no leaked scrim VODs of Florida Mayhem. So I had to put them at the bottom. Like, I just couldn't intellectually make a decision that says, hey, this team that I know next to nothing about is better than the next team. And the only reason I didn't rank it like Slambo did, with the Justice on the bottom, was because I haven't seen more players of the Justice, so I'm willing to give them a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt. Plus, there was a little bit of hometown bias in that.
Yeah, and one of like the big things for me is when we're kind of like ranking these teams, the tank line is really important. And Awesome Guy, I thought he did okay in Season 1. I definitely say he was on the bottom half, probably bottom quarter, third, however you want to put it. He was not a standout main tank player, and Zephyr, while he didn't always have the opportunities on Dynasty, when he was in, he wasn't a huge standout either, but the potential is there on Zephyr, but I'm not completely sold on that main tank position on the Mayhem, so until we see something from the tank line, it's really hard to put all of your eggs in a basket and put it on Saya player and BQB, despite how good that potential other DPS duo can be. Moving on to number 19, you and I both put the Washington Justice, so one of the new expansion teams. So the best way to look at this team is, well, look at the players that have Overwatch League experience. You have Janice, who was the first sign-in. He came in with Wizard Yawn from the New York Excelsior. They signed Otto from the Shanghai Dragons, which, to me, like, I wasn't necessarily sold on the Dragons trading him away. Or dropping him altogether, however you want to say it. That was one of the questionable decisions that I felt like the Dragons made, because Otto definitely had a ton of stand-up moments in Season 1. The other Overwatch League experienced player that they picked up was Guido, formerly of the Seoul Dynasty, and that was one of the pieces of the puzzle for the support line that didn't quite work out for the Dynasty. Despite everything that happened with that team and them not making playoffs, all of that stuff, we're feeling better about Seoul. But for now, you look at Washington, and this is a very young team. When we're talking about rookies, they have Corey, Stratus, Sansum, Fasix, and Hayanu. And, I know we both talked about Corey being a player that has, a lot of potential, but inconsistent.
Mm-hmm.
I remember at one point, that was a feeling I felt about Surefour.
Yep.
And he has definitely proven himself as one of the elite DPS players in the league. Now, that being said, I would not put Corey in a similar league.
Not yet, at least.
Not yet. But Corey and Stratus are both young players. And from my perspective right now, this is going to be a rough team at the start.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like as time goes on, this is going to be a team that is going to be gaining more momentum. But this is not a team I expect to exceed at the start of the gate. That being said, though, at the end of the day, I feel like this is going to be one of the teams that you have to consider are, I'm not going to say a rebuild phase just because it is a brand new team, but this is a team that's looking at the future. They have a lot of young talent that is going to develop over time, and while they might not be the best team initially, the investment long-term could be looking pretty solid. But for now, a lot of it's going to fall down onto the players that do have that Overwatch League experience, and whether or not Wizard is, 9,000 IQ genius, like he keeps claiming to be.
I mean, I talked about a little bit of the reasons why I put them at 19 instead of 20. And one of them, one of the ones I didn't mention kind of goes back to what you said. I just think Janice is a better main tank than Awesome Guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as many memes as we had, stuff that he was the throw tank that New York would put in to make it look like they were losing games when they were so dominant. He is actually a really good tank. So I feel like he's the better tank than Awesome Guy. I think Otto has the opportunity to pop off. Same thing with Corey and Stratus. So I feel like this team, like you said, has kind of that underdog potential. Like I feel like this team could develop into like the Boston Uprising of season 2 if their players play to their maximum capabilities. The key is that they have to do that because this team could very easily go the other direction very quickly. So that's why I ranked them so low. It kind of goes back to, I'm just unsure of them, but I'm slightly more sure of them than Florida Mayhem.
Mm-hmm. So coming in at number 18, we both have the Chengdu Hunters. So just a couple of quick notes about this team. This is pretty much a national Chinese team. They only have one non-Chinese player on this roster, that being Bacon Jack, formerly Flash Wolves, which is one of the Taiwanese teams. We have RUI returning to coach in the Overwatch League. He worked with the Shanghai Dragons last season. And we have a couple of former Miraculous Youngster players on this roster. Now, one of the big things that you and I talked about in the past is the fact that these Miraculous Youngster players and Bacon Jack both have not been competing for over a year and a half at this point when it comes to competitive Overwatch. Do you feel like that is going to have a huge impact at the start of the season, just knowing that, well, yes, they are going to have synergy just based on the fact that, communication isn't really going to be an issue for the team, but they also haven't really been playing recently. Do you feel like that's going to remove some of the MY luster that could be surrounding these players?
It could. The only thing that kind of throws a wrench into it is the patch today. Mm-hmm. So a lot of teams have been practicing goats, and if we go into Overwatch League with a non-goats meta, a lot of teams won't have practiced a lot of counters to new compositions. So I feel like that could kind of even the playing field a little bit. But I did rank them low just because, like you said, there probably is some atrophy there. There is, a little bit of disconnect from not playing at this, high of a level for so long. I think this team could turn into something quite scary if they do, shine that rust off and get that MY luster back, as you put it, because MY were very, very dominant in the Chinese scene for quite a while. So I'm excited to see this. Like, I'm excited to see Bacon Jack back, just because Bacon Jack was always, really fun to watch. And I rated this one so low just by pure, I had to rate others higher because I actually expect things out of them. Like this team, I don't know what to expect out of, and that's kind of like the bottom. How like I did my list is like, okay, Vancouver's gonna do well because they just won contenders 1 season ago, kind of thing. So that was easier to rank to me than, hey, these guys were really good a year ago. Okay, I mean, we've seen that happen in the past, and that doesn't really translate that well. We've seen people be good 2 months ago and not do well, like the Dallas Fuel. So I have hopes for this team. Like I hope the Chinese, the Chinese national team, as you dubbed it, can do well, because I did enjoy watching MY, but I had, we needed a 20, a 19, and an 18, so they had to go there.
Yep, so moving forward, we have our rank 17 team, which all three of us had it the same. That was the Boston Uprising. So when we look at this roster, the players that they kept were Note, Gamzu, Kelix, and AimGod. They dropped Striker, who was traded to the San Francisco Shock. They dropped Neko, Mistakes, who has retired, Kalios, Avast, and Snow. So that's a lot of pieces that are missing from this team. Now, a few of those didn't really see play, which is important to note. But they added Blaze, or Blaze. I don't know how we actually pronounce it. I'm assuming it's Blaze and not Blaze.
Yeah, it has the little accent on it, so.
Yeah. So then Blaze. They added Color Hex, Axiom, Fusions, who is signed to a 2-way contract. So we've been seeing him play for Uprising Academy. And they picked up South American player Alamo. So Boston is... I'm trying to think how I should put this. My biggest question mark on this team is the DPS line. Bar none. They got rid of Stryker, who was their standout player across the board. And yes, there's been issues with the team when it comes to, backstage stuff, the Korean divide on this team. So it's really kind of hard to say where exactly the infrastructure of this team is from that perspective. But, Color Hex and Blase. Blase, I felt like, was a Contenders player that I wouldn't say was a standout DPS player when you consider like some of the other talent out there. So his was more of a question mark sign-in, but Color Hex I felt like showed enough to kind of prove his worth to get picked up. But it's just so hard to kind of weigh where a Contenders DPS duo is going to be when you compare it to the rest of the Overwatch League, because when you look at some of these other Overwatch League teams, they either have one standout DPS player, or they have like 3 or 4 standout DPS players that they're available to pull in on their DPS line. So that's really one of the things that is holding Boston back for me. You can say anything you kind of want to feel about what the backstage situation is, but I'm glad that Uprising are giving an opportunity to players outside of NA and outside of Korea. I feel like that's fantastic, but it also kind of like brings back the whole, buy low, sell high mentality of the Kraft family. So take that for what you will. But I'm really excited to see Color Hex. I feel like Gamzu and Note are going to be good stability for this team. Kelix, he was okay. Aim God is probably going to frag out again. But the DPS line is going to need to prove their worth in the Overwatch League at this level, and I don't know if I see it from them.
Yeah, I just don't have a lot of faith in Boston overall. The only reason I rated them so high was just because of the fact that they do have some very, very notable talent on their team that could possibly carry them to some wins. But after everything that's come out, everything going forward, they're right back how they were in season 1. Like you have to convince me that you're a team that's worthy of being in the top half of the league. Like there's questions about the organization, there's questions about coaching staff, the GM, the Presidente, all of that. So I just have a lot of questions about Boston Uprising. So it's kind of one of those situations where I could have rated them lower and I could have rated them higher, but due to the surrounding questions, I kind of just had to say, you know what, I don't think they're going to be that good to begin with. So I'm going to put them near the bottom.
Right. So moving forward, this will be our last ranked team for today anyway. Not the last ranked team overall. We have number 16, Toronto Defiant. So this is the third expansion team that we kind of have in the bottom part of the rankings. And when we look at this roster, they have 3 players signed to the Defiant that have Overwatch League experience. They have Envy, they have Nico, Asher being the third. On the rookie side of this team, we have Ivy, Stuller, Yakpun, Aid, and Roki. So Envy, to me, is going to be in a... Well, I mean, really, when you look at the Overwatch League experienced players, we got that redemption arc kind of going. There's been all this talk about Overwatch League,
Isn't it an anime?
Isn't it an anime? And there's been a lot of fun banter with that. But if we're talking about anime teams, Toronto Defiant are the sheer definition of that. I feel like... I know I've been pretty harsh on their coaching staff because it is metagaming coaches, and that's been a team that's been around a long time but hasn't really stood out in Contenders Korea, kind of across the board, whether it was with Metabellum or Meta Athena. But they've had a lot of very good talent that has been signed to the Overwatch League in the past. So they're really good at scouting talent. It's just a matter of, can they help their players reach that potential, or are they just going to be kind of like the transitional team? That's where I'm at with Toronto. I feel like the potential is there, but this is going to be another one of those teams where it's probably going to take some time for them to just get that synergy. but I'm not completely sold on, some of the other pieces that they built this team around outside of players that were already in the Overwatch League. I will say, like, for Asher, this is going to be a big opportunity just because with the Gladiators, he was in a very weird position where they just had so many DPS on the lineup, and since they ran a rotation, he did not get to see a bulk of playtime, so there's going to be a lot of weight on his shoulders to really showcase his talent on this lineup. So when I look at this team, I feel like this is going to be a team who are going to be potentially on the brink of battling for like the middle of the pack, but in a grander scheme of things, I do have them on the lower end overall.
That's kind of how I feel. I feel like they'll end up maybe lower side. And as time goes on, their synergy will build. I think they did build around some really good pieces. Like when we did see Asher was actually really good. He just didn't get a whole lot of opportunity to flex. Like he was kind of the Tracer bot. And once Tracer fell out, we didn't see him anymore because, he had Surefour and Hydration. So why would you? Hydration can play anything, and Surefour is like a hit scan, like God at that point. So I feel like you're right. I feel like this is a good chance for Asher, but from what I've seen Asher actually play, he's actually very talented. So I feel like he could be like one of the more underrated DPS players. And, I always liked Envy's play. I feel like Envy's a very confident player. And I feel like going forward, if tanks are that important, I feel like Envy will be, something this team can rally around. I'm also really looking forward to Ivy. Like, I feel like Ivy is one of the top talents that this team signed. And then, kind of looking at the overall pieces, I had, more questions about synergy than I did some of the lower teams I ranked. But just through sheer, like, I don't know, star power, even though they're not, like, as well known as, like, Surefour and some of the names you mentioned earlier, I feel like just out of sheer, like, power, this team could be much better than what we're showing. But again, still have questions about them, so I had to rank them lower. Like this, most of these lower teams, like last year, it was a lot easier to me because the lower teams we were like, okay, I've never heard of half of these people, so I'm gonna rank them low. Like this season is much harder because being in the tier 2 scene following Overwatch League last season, I've recognized a lot of these names, so I can be like, oh yeah, that one time Asher did this thing and that was really cool. If he could do that every time, this team could be really dangerous. But then you got to think like, well, he's not going to be able to do that against like SBB or stuff like that. So there was a lot more like thought process behind this season, and a lot of the lower teams to me just ended up there because I was like, I don't know, they just don't seem as good as some of the other ones. So.
Well, there you go. So anyways, that is our teams ranked 20 through 16. We'll continue our rankings next Monday on our next episode. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and close out the show for tonight. So if you guys want to help us out, one of the best ways to do that is to leave us a review over on iTunes. We're always looking for ways to improve the show. Now that being said, as we get closer to the new season, we'll probably restructure a little bit more to focus on the analysis aspect of the games that are happening. So, we're gonna move things around a little bit to focus on that, just because, like, I feel like we probably enjoy that a little bit more from a content creator's perspective, and I know you guys do enjoy the analysis. So, with that being said, expect a couple of changes here in the coming weeks. We do have Overwatch Recall, which is our podcast directory where we compile a list of all the Overwatch content out there, whether it's Overwatch, Overwatch League, Path to Pro content, and then every Sunday night we release the episodic listings for all the latest episodes for that, so be sure to check that out on our website. And with that being said, we also have a new addition, not just to our podcast network, but we also have a new way that you guys can support us. So we have launched a Patreon page for everyone out there that feels like supporting our Overwatch Podcast Network further to help us grow and get better overall. So right now we are offering 4 different tiers starting at $1 a month. And you can learn more by visiting patreon.com/OWL network. And I do want to shout out Brendan, who became our first patron, so thank you so much for that. And If you're curious about what we're offering, just check out the website because we do have some special perks. The higher up you go, but like the max amount is $10 a month. So be sure to check that out. Now, with that being said, we are expanding our podcast network, and this is something that's going to come together pretty quickly in regards to when we sit down and record our teaser episode, and that is our currently unnamed Fantasy Overwatch League podcast. Now, I know a lot of people are kind of curious about the state of Fantasy Overwatch League going into Season 2 because we haven't really heard anything from Overwatch League themselves about doing their own iteration. We have partnered with Matt, our Soul Drink, who did the High Nude Pick'em last season. We kind of partnered with him with that. We had one of the larger Pick'em leagues out there. A lot of people in our community were a part of that. And he's working on his fantasy league. So we're going to be using that. Winston's Lab is not doing Fantasy Overwatch League, so a lot of this is going to fall on Matt, but we're here to support him 100% of the way, and we're looking to record our episode 0 here very soon. But the plan is we'll be recording on Tuesday nights. I know I already edited in the tables or the information on our Twitch page. You can find the time there. But it will be myself. We'll have Blazin' Bob from Our Recap. We have Edinar from Heroes Never Die, and we will have a 4th member who we will be announcing here probably within the next week or so, but be sure to stay tuned to that. So we're expanding even further, so we'll have 4 podcasts on our network, and, maybe a 5th one, if I can find someone to talk about, Vancouver with. Never know. Could happen. Might not. I don't know. Who knows? But anyways, we're looking forward to that. So we appreciate all the support. And if you feel like pledging and, throwing money at us, we're not going to complain. But stay tuned for some even more content and expanded YouTube coverage in the months ahead to come. But Spider, we have so many different ways where our community can get a hold of us. So why don't you let our listeners and viewers know where they can find us?
Sure. You can shoot us an email at contact@owlnshow.com. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at owlnshow for all our latest updates. If we're running late like we were tonight, that would be the place to find out. You can find our website, www.owlnshow.com. You can find our YouTube, youtube.com/Overwatch League Network. That was a bad joke, Tyler. So yeah, youtube.com/Overwatch League Network. This week, outside of our normal content, I actually have all those Owl Recall videos or Overwatch Recall videos that I slept on over the holidays because I was so busy. So if you missed any of those interviews, they are releasing every day this week at noon. So you can listen to a really good interview with a background of really bad tank play. So, be sure to check that out. You can find our Discord at discord.me/OWLN show. If you're listening to the audio, I would highly encourage you to watch our Twitch because it is a lot of fun. We have some fun in chat, as we just did. Our Twitch is twitch.tv/OWLN show. We are a Twitch affiliate, so you can show some support by subscribing, or you can hit up our Patreon. Either way, it helps keep the lights on at Totem's house. And you never know when they're gonna go out over there in that Chicago area.
You can't throw enough money at us to keep Slambo out of the abyss, unfortunately. So I cannot offer that in any of the tiers on Patreon.
That is not a Patreon goal. I guess if you could get him to quit his job, that would be enough. But even then, that's like the mega ultra platinum tier. So back to our Twitch. All right, back to the Twitch. Focus. Twitch.tv/OWLN show. We have 2 primary shows with a 3rd coming, which is Overwatch League Network is Mondays at 7 p.m. PDT, or PST now, I guess. And then we have Heroes Never Die, which is the Variety Overwatch show, which is Wednesdays at 5 p.m. PST. We have the unnamed Overwatch Fantasy Podcast Tuesdays, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's going to be. And then you can also check out the hosts. We typically stream, around the weekend. Like, you've actually been streaming a lot. Like, it seems like every time I turn into Twitch, you're streaming. I usually take Fridays at 7:30 PST, but Totem streams Thursdays, sometimes Saturdays, sometimes Sundays. Whatever you feel like. Whenever you feel like getting mad at Quick Play or Arcade, that's when you stream. So our missing host tonight is Slambo, but you can find him on Twitter at SlamboOverwatch. You can find myself at SpiderGD. And Totem, why don't you wrap it up?
Well, you can find me yelling into the abyss as I search for my soulmate at TumblyDrunkCTR, and if I'm live, it'll be on this channel at twitch.tv/OWLN show, where I will be streaming more outside of our normal hours, so that's going to be kind of like on the fly, depending on, what I'm doing, but I am planning on streaming a lot more, just have, a little bit more consistency with our, just Twitch schedule, but I am excited to, start the new show. It'll be a good time. Hope you guys check it out at some point, and hopefully, one day, soon, preferably, we'll have all three of us on the podcast, because I was already...
We had all three of us on Friday night.
We did.
That was fun.
So yeah, on Friday night, we had 4 of the network hosts all on playing Quick Play. It was essentially everyone but Edinar. And we were we were dicking around in Quick Play. A lot of us were on, 2 of us, we were on our alt accounts, and then Ren was on his main account, Slambo was on his main account, our MMR was all over the place, and a lot of that does fall on Slambo, like, let's be real.
Yeah.
But despite our efforts...
I can keep up with him on DPS, but not... Yeah. I can't tank against, like, Masters players yet.
Despite our efforts, which were either great or terrible at times, we still had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But, we hope to get us all back on together soon, and I if you haven't been on our Twitter account, you be sure to check it out, because I memed Slambo earlier. I did it in a couple of minutes in Photoshop. Definitely worth checking out. Have a good time with that. But for now, guys, that is going to do it for us here tonight on Overwatch League Network. Again, this has been episode number 62? Question mark? Yeah, 62.
62.
It's going to be hard to keep track of, 5 different shows at this point. But that's besides the point. But we hope to see you back on Wednesday, as we have a special guest this week on Heroes Never Die, that being a Grandmaster Widowmaker player. So stay tuned for that. We'll talk about the latest controversies. We'll definitely be hitting up the PTR discussions. We'll talk about the whole Ellie situation and what no good that has caused the community. All that fun stuff on Wednesday. We hope to see you guys there. But for now, guys, have a good night.
Thank you for listening to the Overwatch League Network. Be sure to follow the show on Twitter at OWLN Show. The theme music for OWLN is the main theme and victory theme guitar remix by Michael Mack.